Hi, I'm Rachel, and welcome to my Hanukkah 5784 vlog. I've been doing this style of vlog for the past few years over Hanukkah, where I read a short story from a Jewish short story collection every night in front of my menorah, starting with night number 1. And this year I'm reading from We Love Anderson Cooper by R.L. Macy's, which is a title that's intrigued me for years, so I'm excited to get to it. But I had a lot of trouble with this story. In fact, I've been trying to explain why, and my candles are going down too low, so let me explain what I think about this story. It's a story of a young boy named Marcus about to have his bar mitzvah. He is a young boy in the closet, and part of the bar mitzvah is you have to read from the Torah a certain portion. And his portion is the Leviticus portion that condemns a man laying with a man, which a lot of people have often interpreted as anti-homosexual, including, it seems, his community, which is sort of vaguely described as, intolerant in that way. And so Marcus is trying to get out of it. He awkwardly tries to tell his mother, I don't want to read this because I don't want to say this about gays. And she's distracted and says, well, just pretend it means something else, which I'm like, ugh, I just hate that whole trope of, oh, the bar mitzvah is really important, except, it's about, engaging with our community, except that you just ignore what you don't like. I don't know. It goes on from there. I mean, I feel like the bar mitzvah in general is, in pop culture and in this story, is really lazily executed. It's really not just a random thing that happens. It's a year-long commitment before the date where you, the bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah students are with your cantor learning the portion, and you're with the rabbi talking about your sermon and talking about the things that are brought up in the Torah and how you relate them to your personal life. It's not just something that just happens. So anyway, but he isn't able to actually reach out to his mother or apparently anyone else about this. So he decides he's going to, in his sermon, instead of saying what his mother wrote for him, which is another big red flag. That's not what the bar mitzvah is about. It's about your personal relationship, not what your mother told you to say. But anyway, he awkwardly comes out and outs his boyfriend by accident because he's just nervous, and that leads to complications and misery and anxiety. The most interesting thing about this story, I think, is that he is this kid from the internet age. I guess Marcus is like, oh, I can get the video uploaded to YouTube and I'll get famous and go on Ellen, and things don't turn out the way he thinks they will. Although his community at school immediately accepts him and he's immediately popular. There's this weird disconnect about, communities he's in. Like, one seems really progressive and one is conservative in the political sense. But his relationship with his boyfriend becomes very bad, and he's just feels really awkward and, strained about the whole thing. So the most interesting commentary, I think, is really about how, setting yourself up in the internet age for celebrity interactions never actually turns out the way you think it will. But the rest of it I did not really sit well with me. And even this title, it came away as a throwaway line that his mother says after he outs himself, which is, why didn't you tell us first? We would have, supported you because we love Anderson Cooper, which feels like the most Fox progressive line a non-progressive person can say. But anyway, yep, that's generally the story. I think that's all I'll be able to say about it before my candles go completely out. Hopefully I'll enjoy my story tomorrow night a fair bit more. It is the second night of Hanukkah, and so far the only thing Judah Maccabee is giving me is the beginnings of a cold, it seems like. But speaking of Judah Maccabee, who's kind of the hero of the Hanukkah story, my next short story in this collection is titled The Infidelity of Judah Maccabee, which of course I figured I'd have to review since it is ostensibly a Hanukkah short story on the second night of Hanukkah. And so this is the story of a married couple. They've been married for 3 years, living a pretty assimilated, non-traditional sort of life in any sort of way except for an electric menorah on Hanukkah. But one year, the wife, Annette, who is non-Jewish, decides she wants to, reconnect with her roots and get a tree and make Christmas cookies and all the things that I guess she grew up with and likes. She doesn't consult the protagonist, her husband Barry, who takes this as an affront as a, wait a second, we were, this one thing before, and now you're trying to bring Christmas into the house, and he takes it as a, oh, the Christians are trying to, overwhelm us again and take away our holidays, and he like goes on a bender in his head like, oh, why is it always so Christmas and no Hanukkah? And there's like, some clever backstory stuff in here to say like, well, first of all, not only, is Hanukkah a minor holiday, technically speaking, but also he obviously doesn't have a lot of religious background or affiliation with Hanukkah, that, he was quite happy just with his electric menorah, which he sometimes forgot to light until his wife brought in the Christmas stuff. But another thing that happened is that it changed the behavior of his cat, who actually, the cat is named Judah Maccabee, which seems ridiculous, but I guess these stories are somewhat satirical in that way, and so they call the cat Mac, and the cat starts hanging out more with Annette. Like, Barry was his primary caretaker, but now the cat wants to like lick Annette's cookie-stained fingers and have Annette feed him, so it's just extra, I guess that's where the infidelity part really comes in, and Barry feels like his affronted and that his whole way of life is under attack. So that's generally the story, which more or less takes place over the 8 nights of Hanukkah, when Christmas takes place in the middle of it, and it's mostly about the changing norms of a relationship in a way. These are the sorts of things I imagine that interfaith couples really need to talk about like where the the boundaries are, or their person, or how they want to identify with personal backstories and histories. And things change and people have trouble adapting to something they didn't quite sign up for. So like in a way, even though this is kind of it's a silly little story, but I feel like there's some deeper issues at play in here about how a marriage will work, and how a relationship will work, and I gotta like how the cat figures into it as well. It's night 3 of Hanukkah. I'm still feeling a little sick, spent my day in my PJs, but luckily I just took a COVID test and it's not COVID, so, it's probably a minor cold. But anyway, I'm still reading from this collection for Hanukkah, and the stories are a little grim. I read 2, because I'm trying to get through the whole collection in 8 days, and I guess I'll talk about the one that has a little more meat on the bones. And that one is called No Shortage of Birds, and it's a story about grief. The main character is this teenage girl named Charlotte, whose father just died of a freak accident. He was this, major golf star, and he got hit in the head with a golf ball, and it caused brain damage, and he went into a coma and died. And shortly after, Charlotte and her mom are kind of sort of trying to go through grief. Well, Charlotte really isn't. She's just sort of checked out of life completely. And the mother decides randomly to buy a parakeet, even though, that's not part of their family history, having birds. And she names the bird after her dead husband, and she, claims it's really for Charlotte. And Charlotte just sees the bird as like an affront. Why would you, name the bird after Dad when Dad didn't like birds, and the bird is surly, and, Charlotte perceives the bird as a negative force in all ways. And ultimately, when the mother is away from home and the heat is off, or the AC is off, and she asks Charlotte to feed the bird, Charlotte ignores the bird until the bird is dead. So yeah, things are kind of macabre, and then she throws the bird in the trash and tells the mom that she buried the bird. But yeah, it's the Charlotte just is, her grief style is the epitome of just having no emotion at all. And she, used to play golf at school, and she, and doesn't do that, and her friends have all abandoned her because she's sort of an emotional zombie, and she sits in therapy and doesn't say anything. So yeah, it's about 2 grief cycles that are kind of clashing against each other, and I guess the power of grief. There's some weird, I don't know, I just feel like it's a lazy hand wave that, oh, the father was, really famous, and they were living off $1 million or something and should be fine, but that the mother didn't fix the AC or blah blah. I don't know why any of it was really all that important. So yeah, but mostly, this one doesn't seem satirical or very funny at all, maybe a little absurd in some ways, but mostly just a rumination on grief after a sudden accident, a startling change, and how, the grief of two people mourning somebody can sometimes, clash with one another. It is night 4 of Hanukkah, and I think I'm over my cold enough to have it have ruined my weekend, but I get to go to work tomorrow, huzzah, or I guess we'll see. But anyway, speaking of sick people, I feel like that's a decent segue into the story I read in my collection for night 4 of Hanukkah. The story is called A Cat Called Grievous. It's the second story I've read for this that features a cat, and third, I think, that features an animal companion. And again, it's about dysfunctional people and animals. It starts with this young couple, the unnamed narrator and her husband Weston, who find a cat in inclement weather who's taken shelter like in a little box by their home, and it seems she just lost a litter of kittens, which kind of coincides with the woman trying and failing to get pregnant and how that's sort of a hole in her life. And so the cat becomes a companion and sort of a salve against this sense of loss. And in the early part of the story, like when they get the cat spayed, who they call Grievous because she's mourning for her lost litter in the beginning, the woman judges the vet who is eager to, spay the cat because, she herself is trying to get pregnant and blah, blah. And it comes up like in her work where she's a tailor and having to sew things for children and so forth. But she and the cat start to really form a bond, and it's quite obvious this is a cat that's very feral. I'm speaking as somebody, I've owned cats all my life, and I feel like they're, the kindness to cats is often overlooked, and, obviously feralness, I suppose, is supposed to be the natural state or something, and it obviously coincides with something in this woman's head, to the point where when she finally does get pregnant and her husband immediately turns off, finding the cat as a companion and, like, thinks of the cat as possibly dangerous for the kid, she's the one who, obviously still sees the cat as central in her life. And so, of course, what happens throughout the next couple of years is that the husband, Weston, is trying to banish the cat, and the wife is, like, quietly feeding Grievous and all of that. And then the young daughter falls in love with Grievous, and Grievous, of course, as the feral cat, is really rough with the young daughter, Nada, always scratching her and hissing at her and, like, claiming dominance. And the wife is like, oh, Nada's fine with it. And she doesn't like that her husband isn't fine with that and is trying to... First, the husband tries to make Grievous into a solely indoor cat, which does not fit with her, feral personality. And then he tries to banish her completely. And so there's another aspect of this story, that the author weaves in subtly, I suppose, about some sort of, out there behavior by the narrator, where she's done some things that maybe we would consider to be feral or, not socially acceptable, much like Grievous and feral cats are not socially acceptable. So the ending, really makes it seem like this lady's a psychopath. That's what I'll say about that. And, I have these defensive mechanisms against these stereotypes about cats and cat owners as being feral and crazy. And I have had cats, and I've watched a lot of stories of cats who are truly loving, and, it's not just about dominance and some sort of mind games between psychopaths that can't actually love. But, I guess she has a knack for these sorts of stories about characters who are kind of off the beaten path and are kind of feral themselves. And so yeah, I guess it's a unique take on motherhood and companionship. I'm on to night 5 of Hanukkah, and I actually ended up staying home today after all because I felt a little sicker today than yesterday. So it's turning into a really strange Hanukkah, and part of the reason for that is this short story collection that I continue to be reading from. Tonight I'm reading from Better Homes and Gardens, which is another throwaway line, except this time it's a narrative. The last time, the We Love Anderson Cooper was actually a line of dialogue in the first story. And anyway, in this story, it takes place during 2008 during the economic recession. And the main character is a married man named Neil, middle-aged, and you'd think maybe that he was a victim of, the recession, as in he lost his job because of it, but instead he quit his corporate job because he found out that his wife was having at least an emotional affair with a guy from high school that she first met on Facebook, and he spied on their correspondence where the wife was, among other things, complaining about him. So he decides, of course, to quit his job and turn into a pizza delivery guy with, the sign on top of his BMW, which, puts his household into a tailspin. They're living off of the college funds for their two twin daughters who go to prep school and are, imbued in a certain sort of life. And the wife never had to work before, but now she's gone off to be a project manager, like I guess an old job she had before she had the twins. And so in a lot of ways, I think these are all kind of unlikable characters because I don't know, they have this daughter, Avery, with learning disabilities, and that just makes her come off as mean-spirited. And, the wife is complaining, but then again, she didn't work before, so in a way, and she had this emotional affair, so she's not entirely the good guy either. But then, meanwhile, Neil's a hypocrite, not only for, not because of the job thing so much, but he does start his own sort of emotional affair with one of the people who orders pizza from him. So, it is what it is. And, throughout the story, in fact, he took money from his joint bank fund, and was already thinking he was going to go ahead and leave his family, and then that money does, play a part into a climactic exchange, and he ends up leaving the family during maybe one of the worst times possible to do so. So everyone is just deeply unlikable here, and I guess this is normal human behavior in some aspects, and the home and gardens thing is about him being resentful of the fact that they are seeing his family, his wife and his kids, see him as someone who provides this lifestyle, and that his wife just wants the better homes and garden lifestyle. So in that way, he's sympathetic, that like he's seen as a bank account, but at the same time, he's not treating them very well either. I feel like he's not, necessarily there for them and their needs. The whole narrative, it's basically him saying, I don't want to live this life anymore, too bad if my kids don't have an Ivy League education, even if I did, blah, 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 and he has no real emotional attachment to any of them, just resentment and sort of just, passive-aggressively screwing them over, so he's not all that nice either. So I'm not sure what my big takeaway is from this, except that assholes don't make good relationship partners, and the recession probably makes things more difficult. But again, in a lot of these stories, I feel like she layers on a few too many layers, and the recession was just sort of a bit of irony that didn't actually play that much into the problems that Neil and his family were having. It is night 6 of Hanukkah. I'm feeling a little better. Went to work today. Yay. And I'm here to talk about a different sort of story in this collection of short stories. This one was called Couch, and it's more surreal than the other short stories I've read, and certainly more narrative. There's less fun, intriguing dialogue and scenes and, conflict back and forth, but it takes place at a therapist's office where she uses her grandma's old couch, and basically her patients sit on the couch and cry, and Penelope, the main character, asks generic, therapy questions and mostly thinks about herself and her own losses, until ultimately the couch breaks down and she has to get a new one. And she goes into, after searching other places, into a secondhand shop, and she finds this really sturdy couch where she feels better immediately, and goes through this big rigmarole over a few days about contacting the owner about the couch. and the owner doesn't want to sell it to her and says, like, you make people cry, and Penelope's like, you don't understand therapy. But basically there's a lot of hints that maybe this isn't the right couch for her, and it turns out that the couch is not the right couch for Penelope because it's just so magical that people stop crying and they immediately think of ways to solve their problems, and she ultimately loses all her patience. And this leaves Penelope in a bit of a funk, where she's drinking and thinking about her own losses, like she lost her husband, and then they split their two dogs between them, who of course were named Jean and Freud. And the one she had died soon thereafter, so she's so lonely. And she sneaks into her husband's place to hang out with the other dog and has nothing going on in her life, although then there's some rambling into maybe looking into short-term therapy sort of options, or like she still gets some referrals sometimes. And there's even a bit in here that I think I like the best, where Penelope realizes, oh, maybe I should, care a little more about my patients than myself. I don't know, this is just, I don't know, in terms of how therapy is depicted, it seems, kind of lazy. Obviously, everyone is the center of their own stories and has their own, real, personal problems that they want to deal with, but it's just like, eye-rolling to read about therapists who seem to only be interested in themselves and not actually know how to talk to other people. I don't know. And then the whole question is, okay, what does all of this mean? First of all, do magical couches fix everything? I guess you don't really need cognitive therapy. And how is she actually going to get her life back on track when neither of these couches are doing it for her in her own personal life? And ultimately she has to follow the advice of the person who she bought the couch from and donate to ASPCA, which definitely does feel like a good moral ending to, help animals and to, give of yourself. So I guess I can enjoy that part of it. But this was a weird story, and it also wasn't as, fun, I think, intriguingly back and forth with the dialogue and the scenes as the other stories. It is the seventh night of Hanukkah, and with Yiddish lessons, I've gotten to the story in this collection, which is the most traditionally or stereotypically Jewish. It is about a Hasidic young woman named Rivka and her relationships with her family members, where she's especially close to her aunt Leah, where they, there's a little bit of a Yiddish focus, but the entire community is, speaking Yiddish. But anyway, Rivka's an only child, and her father obviously is upset or disappointed that she's not a boy that he can can traditionally pass Jewish learning on to. And even with Leah, she has her two children and has decided that her daughter Bruria isn't worth anything and prefers her niece. But when it comes to her son Yankel's the cream of the crop. And within this story, Yankel is about to court and get married, and she's so distressed about another woman taking, over his life that, she starts to get disheveled in her appearance and not, take care of the home and that sort of thing. But ultimately, Yankel does marry and has a kid, and so then it's about our main character, Rivka, being utterly displaced, which I guess this really does fit with a lot of the themes of the stories, where people feel like out of sorts with their family and friends and even their pets about, you're not appreciating me, you don't respect me. And there's even a ending of the story, which there's a macabre ending, which is also something that repeats in a lot of these stories. Where it almost seems like the author is teasing us that Rivka leaves the room when she's supposed to be taking care of the baby, and the baby might be, teetering over dangerously to a window. I don't know. I think that, I don't know, I'm kind of, that feels like a cop-out in a way. It's like, oh, look at me, maybe I'm being, salacious or something, saying that the baby's going to die, but I can't actually show it. And I kind of wish maybe she hadn't gone that far in that direction. But overall, I guess this kind of seems to track with some gendered attitudes in Hasidic communities, and I kind of appreciate that there's at least a traditional Jewish feel to this story. Hello! It is the 8th and final night of Hanukkah, so I am here to review the final short story in this collection, We Love Anderson Cooper by R.L. Mazies. The title of this short story is called Ghost Dogs, and like many other stories in this collection, it's very much about the relationship between humans and their familiar companions. In this case, our main character is a woman named Paula, and she has lost her 2 dogs, whose names are Petal and Tanner, and the story opens up with her hearing the ghostly sound of the dog flap, even though it's pretty apparent very soon that the dogs aren't living and there isn't even a dog door anymore. She's just in that stage of grief. Another way you can tell is the way that her office is described as really messy and cluttered, and that it didn't always used to be that way, and that she'd forget to save her work, and so forth. And then she goes to talk to her husband about it, and the first thing we hear about her husband is that he used to be really thin and now he isn't. And that comes to mean that we come to learn, ultimately, that he had been suffering from cancer and now he wasn't anymore. And actually, she kind of wishes she were still nursing him and taking care of him. It gave her a sense of purpose, and it was also the last time things felt normal. So obviously the big question is what happened to the dogs, and there's a mention of a coyote at one point, which first of all seems familiar to another story that I can't think of off the top of my head and specifically, but I assumed that was a clue, but it turned out to be, I guess, a red herring, because we ultimately do go through the day that her dogs died and that it was her fault, which, this is a legitimate thing to write about. Like, her relationship with her husband is fraying because she's not really that interested in him and his own sort of recovery and return to life because she's in a state of grief. And then also what happened with the dogs. And what happened is one day she picked up his chemo medicine and then went to a client's house, and they had a long meeting. And it turned out, she got to her truck, and the dogs were unnaturally still. And it turns out, after the foreshadowing hint before that they'd eat anything, they ate the chemo medicine and couldn't be saved, which is tragic. Although I feel like, to nitpick, it just feels like a convenient plot point. Like, even in the story, Paula's like, why did I have it in the back with them? Because I'm thinking, yeah, Paula, it makes no sense. Why didn't you just have it in your glove compartment or your purse? Like, who puts chemo medicine in easy reach of dogs in a truck? It just doesn't necessarily feel like something that genuinely happens to people. It does kind of feel like something she needed to happen for plot purposes, which she could have chosen something else. She could have chosen another way that she would have felt responsible for the dogs and their demise, and not have it be so contrived, I think. I'm pretty sure she definitely wanted it to be connected so, profusely to, so directly to her husband's illness and then, recovery, which, isn't, described, other than I guess we just assumed the chemo worked for him. It is a strange feeling, though, because I remember when my own cat was dying of cancer, I was at an oncology office for my own treatment. I have a blood levels that are a little odd. It's not, anything serious for me, but my own, health was actually unnaturally good that month, and my cat was dying, and it was just such a powerful, and I felt such guilt about it even, and it was so powerfully sad. So in a way, I feel unnaturally sympathetic to this story, even though I still really am grappling that I just don't like that she had to be so direct in this way and had to, like, make it so, sort of convenient. I wish she could have done something else. Yeah, I guess that's where I'll leave it. Yeah, there's a lot to think about with this collection, and I will leave my review for my full thoughts on it down below. And I guess with that, that about covers it for me now. Thank you so much for sticking with me in this long project. I hope that it was fun for you and it was intriguing to take such a deep dive into an author's short story collection. I will be back on this channel imminently to talk about the rest of my December reading so far beyond this one book. So stay tuned for my first Am Reading video of the month. In the meantime, Chag Sameach to all of my fellow Jews who've been celebrating the holiday, especially during these very tough times. My thoughts and my heart are with you. And thanks so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.